Hey, what's up, everybody? My name is TooTallToby, and welcome to today's 30-minute Onshape step-by-step tutorial, where we're going to show you how to construct multiple parts in one PartStudio, how to take those parts and put them into an assembly, and even how to create an exploded view of that assembly. Now, what we've done is we've created a PDF to go along with this step-by-step tutorial. It's called the Onshape step-by-step tutorial, the connecting rod by TooTallToby, and we're going to include a download to this step-by-step PDF down below in the description. But in this 30-minute tutorial, we are going to try to cover time-saving shortcuts, the use of the split command, modeling parts for symmetry, exploded assemblies, and lots more. The target level of experience for this tutorial is an intermediate Onshape user, maybe beginner to intermediate, but some fundamental Onshape experience will be very helpful. And I've included a link to a playlist down below here to help you get some of that fundamental experience before you come back into this tutorial. Like I said, we're going to try to cover all this material in the next 30 minutes, and so we're going to be moving at a pretty fast pace. Now, you'll notice that at the top of each section of this PDF, there's a green title. And so if you feel like we're moving a little too fast for your comfort level, what you can do is you could watch each section. So you could watch the video from Sketch 1 down to the section called Multiple Extrudes from Sketch 1. And then you could just pause the video and go back and try to do the step-by-step following the PDF. So if that all sounds good to you, be sure to hit the like button on this video, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and let's move this step-by-step PDF over onto our second screen. Let's bring up our keyboard cam so you can see all of my keyboard shortcuts, and let's get started here with a brand new document in Onshape. So if we take a look at page number 3, we can see we're going to start a new document. We're going to say Create Document here in Onshape. We're going to call this Connecting Rod Assembly and create. And then we're going to use 4 time-saving shortcuts over and over again throughout this tutorial, and those are listed here on page 3. So the first shortcut we're going to use is going to be the S key to begin a new sketch here on the front plane. So I'm going to pick the front plane, press the letter S on my keyboard, bring up my shortcut toolbar, which you can customize. Very useful to customize that menu. We're going to begin a sketch, and then I'm going to press the letter N, and that's my shortcut to get normal 2. Now I'm going to press the S key again and begin a line, and I'm going to create a line that starts here at the origin and moves up, and then I'm going to press the letter Q on my keyboard. Q takes that solid line and turns it into a 4 construction line. So now I'm going to left click here, I'm going to let go of my mouse, and I'm going to type in 160, enter, and that gives us a nice auto dimension, also listed there on page 3 so that you can learn how to do auto dimensioning in Onshape. So let's keep using auto dimensioning here. I'm going to hit escape, press the letter S, begin the circle command, single click, move my mouse, single click again, let go of my mouse, and I'm going to type in 22, enter, and single click, move my mouse, single click again, and I'm going to type in 50. This is what we would call the small end and the big end of the connecting rod. So now we've got those 2 diameters in place. We've got everything that's shown here on page number 4. Let's move on to page number 5, where we're going to add 4 more circles. So this is kind of like doing an exercise in auto dimensioning. So we'll hit escape, press the S key, launch the circle command, and single click, move our mouse, single click again, 30, enter, single click, move our mouse, single click again, 38, enter, single click, move our mouse, single click again, 62, enter, and single click, move our mouse, single click again, 76, enter. So now that we've got that geometry in place, let's move on to page number 6, where we're going to add these 4 lines and 1 arc. And we are going to use the tangent arc command to connect to that line. So if you haven't used this command before, be sure to look down at the bottom of this page for this pro tip, the line arc line workflow. Very helpful in Onshape. So let's create these 4 lines here. I'm going to hit escape. I'm just going to kind of clean up my dimensions a little bit before I get started here. And let's press the S key, line, and we can start out up here, kind of above this circle, single click, move our mouse over, single click again, and now we're going to create a line at an angle. Now, if you look at the top of the screen, you can see that this circle is highlighting in orange, or this circle is highlighting in orange as we move our mouse around down here for this line. And what you'll notice is when you look at the line itself, you're getting a tangency relationship. So you can see I'm going to be tangent to that second circle or tangent to that inside outside circle. We don't want that. So just be on the lookout for that orange highlighting in Onshape. It's very helpful to make sure that you don't accidentally get a sketch relationship. Now, of course, if you did that, you could delete the relationship afterwards, but let's just try not to get it to begin with here. So we're going to create an angled line here. There's no relationships on the line. We're going to single click, and then we're going to move our mouse away from that end point. So you can see here, we're moving away from that end point, put our mouse over the end point without clicking anything, move away again, and that lets us create a tangent arc coming off of that end point. And once we create that tangent arc and left click, now we're back in the line command. So that is a very useful shortcut workflow in Onshape, the line arc line workflow. So now we'll finish off this sketch by making a vertical line here, and then we're going to move over here and we're going to make a horizontal line, which is vertical to that orange point. So once again, we're getting that orange highlighting. So we single click, and there we go. We can hit escape. That gives us those 4 lines and that 1 arc. So now if we move on to page number 7, we're going to mirror that geometry. And the way that we can do this is we can pre-select the geometry and then click the mirror command. So we can click these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 solid pieces of sketch geometry that we sketched a moment ago. And then finally, we can sketch this center line as well, and then come up here and click the sketch mirror command. And there we go. That mirrors that geometry right across that line. And that's what we see here on page 7. So now if we move into page 8, we're going to add these 6 dimensions and add this one single coincident relationship. Now, something that's pretty cool about dimensioning in Onshape, here you'll see if we press the S key, we can jump into the dimension command. Something that's pretty cool about the dimension command is we can dimension to a plane. So I could create a dimension here to the top plane and then down to this line here, and that's going to be 20. And from the top plane up to this point here, and that's going to be a dimension of 15. So it's often very useful to be able to dimension to planes rather than having to dimension to sketch geometry. So we're going to dimension here from this line to this line. That's going to be a dimension of 90. We're going to create a dimension here on this arc. That dimension is going to be 60. And now we've got our sketch kind of tangled up, and this happens sometimes in CAD, and it's no big deal. What you could do is you could notice that up here on the toolbar, the dimension command is currently pressed in. So that's letting you know that the dimension command is your active command. So all you need to do is just press that button again, get out of the dimension command, or you could press escape on your keyboard, and then just grab one of these blue endpoints and drag it around a little bit till the sketch becomes untangled. Maybe grab this line here and drag it around till the sketch becomes untangled. So you just grab some blue geometry, drag it around, and usually you can untangle that sketch. So now S key dimension, we'll add a dimension here for the angle between these 2 lines. Looks like that's 4 degrees. And dimension from this point to this point, looks like that's going to be 32 millimeters, 32. And then finally, again, we're in the dimension command. So if you press escape, that clears you out of that dimension command. You can click this arc and this point, and then you can press the letter I on your keyboard. And that's the shortcut to add your coincident relationship. I make those 2 coincident. And now you see we've got a nice fully defined sketch here. You'll notice that the minus sign goes away over here in the tree. Let's see if we get rid of this. Let's get rid of this 60 dimension here. So hit escape, click on that dimension, press delete. Notice you've got a minus sign over here in the tree. That sketch is under constrained or under defined. We always want our sketches fully defined. So we're going to go dimension, and we'll drop in a dimension right here, 60, enter, and there we go. That minus sign goes away. So that takes us through to the bottom of page 8, and now we are going to hit the green check mark to exit that sketch. And that is the end of the first section of this tutorial. If you like what you're seeing so far, be sure to hit the like button. If you learn any new cool tips and tricks, be sure to leave comments down below. Let us know what you learned. And if you have any questions, let us know that down below as well. But here you can see we can now move on to the next section, multiple extrudes from sketch 1. One of the most powerful elements of Onshape is the ability to create multiple extrusions from a single sketch. So what that means is we can choose the extrude command, and now we're going to say we want this to be a solid extrusion. We want it to be new, meaning we're making a new part down here in the parts list. And we're going to choose a region or regions from this sketch. So we're going to choose this region here and this region here, the 2 regions that are between the 22 millimeter and the 30 millimeter circle. Now for the depth of this extrusion, the depth in this direction, we're going to type in a value here. That value is going to be 22. And we're going to come down to the bottom here where it says symmetric. Now at the bottom of page 9, you'll notice that it says pro tip, use Shift Enter to activate the repeat last command function. And this is really useful in Onshape because you often create one sketch to represent different depths of the extrusion. So we've created this one single sketch here, and now we're going to hold Shift and press Enter. And what Onshape does is it finishes that extrude command, but takes us right back into the extrude command for extrude 2. So we want to reuse sketch 1 in the tree here. So we come over to the tree, we say show sketch, show that original sketch again so we can see it. And now we're going to go down to the big end of this connecting rod, and we're going to choose this region and this region, the two regions that are part of that inner circle. And so for this extrusion, this is on page 10, we're going to bring this out to a depth of 32 millimeters. And once again, we're going to choose symmetric. And now once again, we can hold Shift and press the Enter key. So hold Shift, Enter, and boom, we get taken right away into extrude 3. So here you see now we're in extrude 3. So for extrude 3, what we're going to do is we're going to choose the entire sketch 1. So here in this box, faces and sketch regions to extrude, we're going to choose the entire sketch 1. So we go sketch 1 here. There we go. The preview updates. That looks good. And instead of making a new part, so we end up with 3 parts down here in the parts list, we're going to choose add, and we're going to choose merge with all. Add and merge with all. So now you see you only have one part down here in the parts list. And so we're going to set that depth to 16 millimeters, and we're going to say symmetric. And look at that. That preview looks great. We hit the green check mark. This part's looking pretty good. I think what might make it look a little better is if we change the color to gray. So on page 11, we can see that under appearance, so you're going to go over here to the name of the part. You're going to right click, and you're going to say edit appearance, edit appearance. You're going to see here that we have the option to change the color of this part, and we're going to change it to kind of a gray color so it looks like it's made out of metal. Oh yeah, that is looking good. So we hit the green check mark there, and that takes us to the bottom of page 11, and that also takes us to the end of that section. So what do you think? Did you like what you see? Let me know down in the comments, and let us know if you have any questions. So now we're going to move into a section called cut the model into 1/4 of its original shape. Now, if we were doing a tutorial that was facetious or, not realistic, what you would do is you would start at the very beginning of the tutorial and you would say, I know I'm only going to model 1/4 of the part, so I'm just going to draw up 1/4 of the part. But in my experience in the real world, you often end up in this spot where you start creating the model and then you realize, you know what, I'm going to have to do some detail work here for this I-beam section, and then I'm going to have to mirror that over to the other side. And I'm also going to end up in a spot where I'm creating a counter bore here, and then I'm going to have to mirror that over to the other side as well. So a lot of times in the real world, what you realize is after you've made a couple of features, you know what? It might be easier to just do 1/4 of this model and then mirror the entire part in 2 directions. And if that ever happens to you, it's going to be good to know how to cut this part in half. Now, like I said, a lot of tutorials, they'll just start you out right at the beginning and say, just model 1/4 of the part. But for this tutorial, I wanted to give you a little more of a real world scenario. Plus, this gives us the opportunity to show 2 different applications of the split command. So the first application of the split command is going to be to cut this model in half using a plane. And we're going to do that by searching. So you come up here to the upper right. We're going to search for split. So we search for split. We click on the command to begin the command. And then we choose this part to be split, the entire part. And then here where it says entities to split with, we're going to choose the front plane. And we're going to say, don't keep both sides. So when you uncheck this option for keep both sides, what happens is you're able to take that model and you're able to cut away the entire model from that front plane. Now, later in the design, we're going to use the split command where we do keep both sides. But for now, we're going to say don't keep both sides. We're going to flip this arrow here so that we're keeping just the front half of the model, just like it shows in the book. And then we'll click the green check mark. And maybe we'll rename this feature something like Shift N to get into rename. And then we'll call this something like cut in half dash front. So now we know that feature is being used to cut the model in half. And now we're going to repeat that command. So if you go down to page 13, we're going to repeat that command. So here in search tools, we'll choose split again. We're going to choose this part here to split. We're going to choose the right plane as the entity to split with. And we're going to say, don't keep both sides. And then again, if we click on this button here to flip it from one side to the other, we'll just keep what's on the left side of that right plane. So we're going to click the green check mark, and then we'll come over here to the tree, Shift N, and we'll call this cut in half dash right. So now we have successfully cut that model in half in both directions, and that takes us down to the bottom of page 13 and into the next section of the tutorial. But I hope that you appreciate that this is not something you would normally see in a tutorial. This is just something I wanted to share with you because it's come up for me multiple times. I kind of get 5 or 10 steps into the design, and then I realize, you know what? It'd be nice if I could just cut this into a quarter and then mirror all at the end of the design. And now you know how to do that in Onshape. If you like the split command, hit the like button on this video. All right, let's move on now to page number 14, the I-beam section. We're going to cut this area here where we're kind of cutting out some material. We're going to leave 6 millimeters gap on all sides here. So let's select this face here. We're going to press the S key, begin a sketch, press the N key to get normal 2, and then we are going to sketch 4 lines and 2 circles. So when it comes to sketching these lines, let's press the S key, line. We're going to single click here right in the middle. We're going to make sure that we're coming off horizontal from that middle area. So you see that white horizontal indicator. Now we're going to create a line which is parallel to that side line of the part. Well, what you can do is put your mouse over that side line first to kind of wake it up. And then when you get close to parallel, you'll see Onshape will snap to parallel and it gives you that nice orange preview. So that's exactly what we want there. So we'll single click. And now to get this final line here, just be careful. You don't want to be perpendicular. You want this final line to be horizontal, and you want it to be horizontal right to that middle edge of the part. Single click, and then move your mouse up here to close off that sketch, single click. And so now we're going to hit escape, press the S key, jump into the dimension command. We're going to dimension from the bottom of this circle to that line. So that dimension is going to be 6, enter. From this side wall to that line, that dimension is going to be 6, enter. And from the circle up here, this circle right here, to that line, it's going to be, you guessed it, 6, enter. So now we've got 6 millimeters per side kind of running around for that I-beam section. And now let's get in there and add those circles. So S key, circle. We're going to create a circle that goes from here, from kind of the middle of the part up to this point. So it's going to be coincident to that point. And we're going to add a circle here. And for this one, maybe you want to zoom in. Just make sure you get it to this point here. You know, it might be tangent to this line. It might be coincident to this point, but don't make it tangent to this other larger circle in the background. So just make it, you know, tangent to that point or coincident to that point. That's fine. And then you can hit escape, pick this line, pick this arc, and you're going to press T on your keyboard, T for tangent. So T for tangent there. And then we're going to do the same thing here. Pick this arc, pick this line, T on your keyboard, T for tangent. So that's that sketch. You can see it's nice and fully constrained. And now we're going to use that sketch to perform an extrude. And we're going to do a remove where we say we want there to be 3 millimeters worth of material here. So 3 millimeters because we're going to mirror it. And that'll give us our 6 millimeters worth of material total. So we're going to go to the command extrude. And you can see here from the preview, it's not quite what we wanted. So the shortcut to clear your selections, to clear these selections here, instead of pressing the X, you can just press the space bar on your keyboard. So space bar, that clears all your selections. And then you can go through and pick this half circle, pick this middle region, pick this half circle, and there we go. That's what we want that cut extrude to look like. But we do want it to be a cut, not an add. So we're going to say remove. And now we want to say that we want it to go all the way up to this surface, but we want it to back off by 3 millimeters. So the way that we do that in Onshape is we say up to surface or up to face for the end condition, and then we roll around here and we pick this face. So now that cut is going all the way up to that face, and then we say we want there to be an offset distance. So we click offset distance here, offset distance, and that offset distance is going to be 3 millimeters. So 3, enter. Preview looks good, enter once more, and we're done with that feature. So that is our I-beam cutout shown here on page number 14. And then when we move into page number 15, we can see the steps that you need to take to establish that up to face and that offset distance. And finally, we're going to add a 5mm fillet to this lower edge of that I-beam cutout. So S key, fillet, and that fillet is going to be 5mm, and it's going to be applied here on this edge. And then once you pick that edge, you can press enter, and that finishes that command. So that takes us to the end of page 15 and takes us to the end of that section on the I-beam. So now let's move on to the bolt nut area. So we'll rotate the view around something like this. And what we're going to do is pick this face here and then use this face to do an extrude. This is really cool in Onshape. When you pick a face, you can jump into the extrude command and you don't need to create a sketch on that face to perform an extrude. So in the case of this example, we're going to remove some material from this top ledge. Well, we're just going to pick that face, then we're going to click remove, and now we're going to set the depth here to a depth of 8mm. So it's nice that we don't have to go in and trace around that upper surface or do a convert entities or anything like that. You can just pick the face and then do an extrude right from the face. So now we're ready to create the sketch for our counter bore. So the way we're going to create this sketch is we're going to create some geometry that starts out right here along this edge. And we're going to create kind of some clearance here for the nut of this bolt that's going to be sticking through here. Then we'll create the geometry for the through hole. And then down at the bottom here, we'll create a counter bore to account for the head of that bolt. And we'll make that a socket head cap screw. So the socket head cap screw will kind of sit in here like so, and then the shaft of the bolt will come up through here, and then there will be a nut sitting up top here. So we're going to need to account for that nut. We're going to need to add a little bit of clearance up top, and that's why we're going to create this sketch, kind of what's shown in red here. So the sketch needs to be created on this face, but for some reason, I can't seem to pick that face. I can only pick the sketch. I can't seem to get back there and pick that face. It's almost like the sketch is in my way, and I can't just get back there and pick the face itself. So when this happens in Onshape, what you can do is you can use the tilde key. That's this key up here, kind of all the way up in the upper left. And this activates what's known as select other in Onshape. So every time you pick that tilde key, you're selecting a different item that's in the background. And then when you left click, that item becomes selected. So I'm on the back side of the model, but I was able to select right through and pick that fillet that's on the front of the model. It's pretty cool how select other works. So in this case, I'm trying to pick this face so I can begin a sketch, but I'm ending up selecting that original sketch one. Well, what we could do is put our mouse over this face and then press the tilde key, and then this is the face that we want, face of cut in half. So once the cursor is highlighting that, if you see here, I press the tilde key, all I need to do is left click, and now I can press the S key and begin a sketch. So that select other is really handy when there's a sketch or a plane or a surface or something else in the foreground that's in your way. So we're going to begin a new sketch there on that face, and then we're going to press the N key to get normal to. Maybe we'll zoom in a bit up here, and now we're going to create that geometry like we sketched out in red. That geometry is shown here on page number 18. It's a little bit tricky. We're going to be using a doubled dimension. So we're going to create a center line here. So you can press Q for that center line, and then you can hit escape. And then we're going to create another center line over here. So like right on this edge, not at the midpoint, but right on this edge, we're going to create another center line. So you can press Q for that one. And then what we're going to do is let's make sure this one's long enough. Make sure this is really sticking out the top. And then what we're going to do is we're going to press the S key and bring up the dimension command. And we're going to create a dimension from this point to the center line. And we're going to cross over that center line. Now, this is what's called a doubled dimension. And this is very handy when you're creating geometry for half the model and you're going to mirror it later. Because when I drop this double dimension here, I can say I want that to be 78 millimeters. So that's going to be my center to center for those bolt holes. Now I'm going to create the geometry for the bolt. So we're going to go in here. We're going to say line, S key line, create a line here that comes down. This is going to come down to kind of all the way out the bottom of the part. That's like the center of that counter bore hole. We'll come over here a bit. We'll come up like so. We'll come in just a bit. We'll come all the way up here to that same original edge. We'll come out here like so, come up a little bit here like so, and then we will close off that sketch. So that gives us that geometry that's shown here on page 18, step B. Now, as far as this line here being 2 lines, you can make that all as 1 line if you want. I just made it as 2 because it's a little easier to teach the lesson that way. But now I'm going to go into the dimension command, so S key dimension, and I'm going to create a dimension from this line to this center line here. And now, once again, we're going to get the doubled dimension, but this time, instead of using it for symmetry, we're using it for diameter. So the diameter of the clearance area for the nut is going to be 18 millimeters. The diameter of the shaft of the bolt here is going to be 6 millimeters. And the diameter of the head of that bolt for that socket head cap screw is going to be 10 millimeters. 10 millimeters. And now I'm going to add a dimension here. This dimension is really just a dimension to make sure I've got enough room for clearance. So it really doesn't matter what that dimension is as long as it's large enough to clear out this area here. And same thing with this lower dimension. It really doesn't matter what that dimension is. So I'm just making both of them 20. And then the final dimension is the depth of the counterbore itself. And that is going to be 25. So now my sketch is fully constrained and it looks just like the sketch on page number 18. And if your sketch looks the same as page number 18, then you are ready to move forward with this cut revolve. So we're going to launch the revolve command here in Onshape. So launch the revolve command here, revolve. And then the revolve axis is going to be this line here, the center line over here for that counterbore. And then we're going to say remove rather than add. So there you see that counterbore shape is clearing out some area up here for the nut, and then it's also creating the counterbore down below there to account for that socket head cap screw. So that's all looking good to me. I'm going to hit the green check mark, and that moves us down to the bottom of page 18 and into the next section. And so now we're going to move on here to our section for the final fillets. We're just going to add a couple of fillets. We are going to be adding 3 different fillets of 3 different sizes. So this could be another spot where we use that Shift-Enter shortcut. So let's click in the background, S key fillet, and we're going to set this fillet radius here to 16. And we're going to say that's going to be applied to this corner here, and that's going to be applied to this corner down here. And so Shift-Enter. Oh yeah, it takes us right back into the fillet command. I like that. And so now we're going to add a fillet here at 3 millimeters, and this one is going to be applied to this edge here and to this edge down here at the small end, and Shift-Enter. Oh yeah, and one more here at 2 millimeters, and that one is going to be applied along this edge, which should kind of wrap it all the way up here, all the way up towards the top of the model. So that finishes those 3 fillets, those final fillets, and that takes us into our next section of the tutorial where we are going to mirror this part twice. So we're going to turn this 1/4 model back into the full model, and we'll do this by clicking the mirror command here, mirror. So click the mirror command up top here, and the entities to mirror, we're going to mirror the entire part. And then the mirror plane, it's going to be the front plane. So you click here on the front plane, and there you go. You can see you're mirroring that from the back to the front. And we hit the green check mark, or we could even do another Shift-Enter here, right? Shift-Enter, back into the mirror command again. I like it, I like it. So we pick this entire part here, and now for our mirror plane, we're going to choose the right plane. So that mirrors that part across, and we hit the green check mark. And there we go. And then anytime you've got extra geometry shown, you can use the P key. P hides the planes, and P will show those planes again. Or in the book, it says use Shift P. That hides not only the planes, but also the sketches and the origin, any construction geometry as well. So Shift P, that hides everything. And now we've got a pretty good looking model. It looks very much like what we're seeing here at the bottom of page 21. And that's going to bring us to the end of that section. So we're going to get in here. We're going to create 2 additional parts in our PartStudio. We're going to create the wrist pin, and we're also going to create the rod bearing inserts. So on page number 22, we can see that we are going to show sketch 1. Show sketch 1. We're going to launch the extrude command. And once we launch the extrude command, we're going to choose the option here for thin. Thin. So choose this option over here for thin when you're in the extrude command. Take your mouse out on the screen and you should be able to select this circle. Try and get the entire circle there, not the region, but the entire circle. And then you're going to say that you want the wall thickness to be 3 millimeters and click this arrow here to flip it to the inside. You're going to say that you want the depth of that extrusion to be 52 millimeters and enter. And then you're going to say you want that to be symmetric. And finally, we want this to be a new part. So we're going to be creating a new part here in the PartStudio. Currently, there's one part, the connecting rod. We're going to click new here, and that's going to make a new part for us, which is going to be that wrist pin. So we click the green check mark, and there we go. We created a thin feature extrusion. Pretty cool feature in Onshape, the thin feature. So now let's do this again. So we go extrude, and this is going to be thin. And then for our regions to extrude, we're going to pick this circle here. Again, try to get the full circle here. So we pick this circle. This takes us to page 23. And for this one, we're going to reverse the thickness, so it's going to the inside, and set that value to 0.5 millimeters. The depth is going to be 30. It's going to be symmetric. And this, once again, is going to be a new part. So you click new. This is all shown here on page number 23. And we hit the green check mark. And oh yeah, that's looking good. So at the bottom of page 23, you can see that we now have 3 parts in our parts list. Let's rename them to connector rod. So we'll pick on this first part here. And once you pick on that part, you can press Shift N. And we can call this connecting rod. And then for our second part here, so click in the background so nothing is selected. Pick that second part, Shift N. We'll call this one wrist pin. And then click in the background, click on this third part here, Shift N, and we'll call that one rod bearing insert. And then finally, on page number 24, we're going to hide sketch 1. So up here in the tree, we're going to say hide sketch 1. And we're going to change the appearance of each part below. So we're going to come in here and we're going to change the appearance. So right mouse button on this part. We already got that one. We don't have to change that. The wrist pin, right mouse button, say edit appearance. We can make that like a dark gray or like a very light. I'm going to make it almost like a white color here. I think that looks good. And then right mouse button on rod bearing insert, say edit appearance. Let's make that like a brass or a copper color here. One of these colors in this middle column. And so we hit the green check mark. And there we go. We've got our 3 parts here in the tree. That brings us to the bottom of page 24 and brings us to the end of that section. So the goal of this tutorial is to show you how to create an assembly from these parts, an assembly from this multi-part studio. And so part of that process is sometimes taking one single part and splitting it into 2 parts. Now, earlier we used the split command to cut away geometry, but now we're going to use the split command in a different capacity. We're going to search for the command split. You can see it's here in your recently used, so you don't even need to type it in. We're going to choose to split this part here, the rod bearing insert, and this part here, the connecting rod. And then for the entities to split with, we're going to choose the top plane. So we pick the top plane here as the entities to split with, and we get a little preview. It's almost like the connecting rod is being split into 2 parts. Well, that's exactly what's happening with both the connecting rod and the rod bearing insert. In fact, you can see it down here in the parts list. You can see that we're going to end up with additional components because of that split. So we're going to hit the green check mark, and now we've got 5 parts down here in our parts list. So on page 26, let's rename 2 of those parts. Instead of this being called connecting rod and connecting rod, let's rename them to rod. So Shift N, we'll call this one rod. And then this one here, Shift N, we'll call this one rod cap. And so there are the 5 components for your connecting rod assembly all together here in this one single part studio. So let's move on to page number 27, the assembly section of this tutorial. And so for this assembly section of this tutorial, we're going to click here on this tab that says assembly, and we're going to choose to bring in those parts from that part list, from that PartStudio. So we click on this command here that says insert, and that takes us down to page number 28. We're going to click on the PartStudio here, PartStudio 1, and then we're going to click the green check mark. And now all those parts have been brought in from the PartStudio, but this is an assembly, which means we can grab these parts and we can drag them around. They're all totally free to move. So we could add in some assembly motion and add in some mates. I'm going to press Control Z, which is undo, Control Z, undo all 3 of those. And then I'm going to go over to the tree and I'm going to right click on the rod and I'm going to choose Fix. So now if I go to move the rod, it is immovable. We took that one part and we made it immovable. And now I'm going to take all the other parts and I'm going to group them to the rod. Now group takes multiple components and locks down their relative motion to one another. So I'm going to click these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 components. And then I'm going to choose the group command up here, group. And once I choose that group command, what's going to happen is when I hit the green check mark, now none of these components can move. So the wrist pin can't move, the rod cap, nothing can move here. And this isn't a very exciting mate. We don't see any dynamic assembly motion or anything, but this is something very common that you do when you design multiple parts in a PartStudio, and then you bring them into an assembly as a sub-assembly and they all move together. A lot of times what you do is you just group them together so that there's no relative motion between those parts. So if you want to learn more about assemblies in Onshape, I have included a link here at the bottom of page 29. You can check out my step-by-step tutorial on the Stirling engine, and we really go into detail on mates and assembly motion in Onshape. So let's get to our final section here of the tutorial, the exploded view. Let's create an exploded view of these components. They're all locked together. Well, we can go over here to the exploded view panel, click on that exploded view, and now we can start pulling these parts away from one another. And this can be very useful to help explain to your teammates or to your customer how the parts are assembled. And this exploded view can also be shown in a 2D drawing in Onshape. So very useful capabilities here. So I'm going to click the button that says Add Exploded View. And then all we need to do is left click on a component and then left click and drag an arrow. So I'm going to left click and drag this vertical arrow straight down here. And when you let go of that drag, you get a nice connector line there and you get your explode step 1 box up above here. So once we drag that down, I'm going to click the green check mark. Click the green check mark, and then we're going to repeat that with the remaining components here. So I'll take this component, left click and drag that arrow straight down, click the green check mark, take this component, left click and drag that arrow straight down, click the green check mark, and I'll take this component and I'll drag this arrow out. We'll show that that component is kind of coming in from the front. Click the green check mark, and then when we're done with this exploded view, we can say done, and then you can double click here on this explode 1 if you want to show that view or not show that view. You double click here on explode 1. And so that brings us to the conclusion of this tutorial. Wow, the time went by really fast on this tutorial. But I hope that you felt like you learned a lot from this tutorial. We really covered a lot of material in a short period of time, and along the way, I hope you learned about all these cool functions in Onshape. If you enjoyed this tutorial, be sure to hit the like button, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and be sure to leave us some comments down below. Let us know what you thought about the tutorial. Let us know what you thought about this format. Be sure to visit us at onshape.pro/TooTallToby, where you can sign up for 6 months of Onshape Professional to try out for you and your team. And we will see everyone in the next Onshape step-by-step tutorial. See you, everybody.